Welcome to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success. Hey everyone, and welcome to the College Admissions Process Podcast. I'm your host, John Durante, and thank you for joining me. Today's episode is a little different from the usual. Recently, I had the chance to be interviewed on another podcast called Test and the Rest with Mike Bergin and Amy Seeley. We covered a lot of ground discussing what I've learned after releasing over 250 podcast episodes, interviewing college admissions representatives. And I'm happy to share that conversation with you today because it really captures some of the most important takeaways from speaking with so many experts in the field of college admissions. One of the great things about being part of the podcasting community is that longtime podcasters don't see each other as competitors. Instead, we help each other out by sharing knowledge and collaborating. Since podcasts are on demand, listeners can tune in whenever it's convenient for them. So in that spirit, I'm happy to share this episode from Test and the Rest on my podcast. Now, I encourage you to check out Mike and Amy's show as well, as they bring great insights into both college admissions and so much more. But for now, let's dive into this special episode where I get to be in the hot seat and reflect on all the incredible wisdom shared by college admissions experts over the years. I hope you enjoy it, and best wishes to all.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Amy Seeley, president of Seeley Test Pros and Leap, helping students to succeed in all kinds of tests from 8th grade to grad school throughout Ohio.
And I'm Mike Bergin, president of Chariot Learning, helping students with Test School and Life based out of Rochester, New York.
Between the two of us today, we have over 60 years of experience at the highest levels of the test preparation and supplemental education industries.
We both love to talk and learn about the latest issues in education, testing, and admissions. So let's get down to tests and the rest. The fascinating topic we want to explore today is admissions lessons from admissions reps. But first, let's meet our special guest, John Durante.
Dr. John Durante graduated from Stony Brook University. He has been the principal of Syosset High School for 13 years and has been named Best Principal on Long Island and received the PTA Founders Day Award and Jenkins Award. He started his career at Syosset High School in 1994 as a teacher of world languages, and he prides himself on helping others. After helping his daughters through the college admissions process, he came up with the idea of interviewing college admissions representatives to provide students with parents with insight and advice straight from the people who ultimately make the admissions decisions, launching the College Admissions Process Podcast. John is also the author of Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. Welcome.
Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate coming back on the show, and congratulations to all of the great work that you're doing. I've been listening to some of your episodes, and you guys are terrific.
You're too kind. It's always a pleasure to be joined by a fellow educator and podcaster. And in your busy life, it means a lot that you found some time to talk about some topics that we're really interested in. Before we get into that, we'd love to hear, you were on our show back in episode 493 to talk about how to speak to a college admissions rep. We're kind of continuing that. Before we dive into this conversation, though, we'd love to hear what you've been up to, especially because you've been up to some pretty big things since last we spoke.
Well, I appreciate that. And as you know, I am a high school principal, as Amy mentioned, at Syosset High School. Been here since 1994. I love my community, love my school. But ironically, I started the College Admissions Process podcast after helping my own daughters through the college admissions process, particularly my younger one who had an IEP. Going through the process was not your typical college process, if you will, because she had the IEP. She didn't have a very high average. And so I just didn't know where she was going to go. By the way, she's a senior currently in college up in Connecticut, thriving,
Yay,
living her best life. So, but going through it, I actually felt the stress that parents feel. And so I became one of those parents who had to reach out to the admissions reps. And I was very blunt with them. And I asked, should she even apply? I actually asked questions like that, and I found that the reps was so amazing. I was so impressed at how willing they were to help, to answer the questions, and frankly, to give it to me straight. So I decided that I wanted to do a podcast, and being that I was going through the college admissions process with my own daughter, I thought, what better idea than to bring in an admissions rep for each episode where they talk about their school, they give insights into their application review. And I thought maybe that'll help people. And so I reached out to the few reps that I had become friendly with, and the rest is history. I'm approaching 300 episodes, and it's just been so
Yay.
much fun. So much fun.
It's brilliant. Now, between your responsibilities as the principal of a high school, which we all know is substantial, and running a really like one of the best college admissions podcasts out there,
Oh, thank
you
you.
still found time to publish a book. Tell us a bit about that.
So that was definitely not the original plan. Never in a million years that I think I was going to write a book. But as I started to grow with the podcast and I started to get the deans of admissions and the directors and people actually reaching out to me saying that they want to come on to the show, I thought I think I'm really onto something here. I'm adding value to students going through the process and their families. And I thought, not everybody has the time necessarily to listen to hours and hours of podcasts. Some people prefer to just read a book. So I was thinking about putting everything that I learned in this book as a summary, right, of all of the lessons learned. And the tipping point was that I was actually a guest speaker for private counselors. They were based out of California. It was a virtual meeting. And someone during the Q&A said to me, you really have to do a book. And
Really,
and that was the
it was
turning
that
point.
moment.
It was
Yeah.
that moment I paused and I said, you know what? He's right. I really need to do it. And I started writing very simply, Mike. I created just an outline of all of the main topics, all of the different nuances, things that I wanted to cover. And I took each one and I basically just wrote about each. It was like doing a book report for each topic. I felt like I was back in high school. And eventually I got to the point where I could finally work with an editor, and the rest is history. It took me about a year and a half, but
Oh.
I'm really glad that I did it.
It's so well organized. I have the book, and it's just like the way you describe it, the attention to structure is critical, and that really matters because the college admissions process
Hmm.
feels very chaotic for
And
people that don't know what they're doing. And so when we take it step by step, like, okay, you got to think about this, you got to think about this, you got to think about this. So congratulations on that.
thank you.
Let's carry the conversation about the college admissions process and how difficult accessing the information or even knowing where to begin can be if you don't talk to somebody that knows what they're doing. And you have made it a habit to speak to admissions reps, and it is their job for many of the ones that we know. It is their pleasure to talk about their schools, but also talk about the process and try to help help students along this really complicated application process. So, you know, you speak to so many admissions reps. I mean, you've chronicled all that. Let's talk about why. What can admissions reps share? What have you found that you learned from admissions reps that you're not just going to get from, I don't know, some other less specific source?
Well, I appreciate that question. Thank you so much. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, which is the entire point of the podcast is to really bring value to the students going through the process and their families. And so it's not just one thing that a rep says or one episode, but when you start listening to some of the episodes, whether you're applying to the school that I'm interviewing or not, you start to hear the similarities, the differences, some nuances, how some schools, look at certain things on the application compared to others. One of my favorite episodes, by the way, was episode 250, where Larry from Michigan State, he actually had an idea. He said, I have a friend from the Ivy Leagues. I'm going to bring him on. And, I can't tell you who he is yet because, we got to make sure that he gets permission. He's into this and what have you. And long story short, it was Larry and Logan Powell, who's the dean of admissions at Brown University.
Mhm.
So that episode, for example, was a comparing of similarities and differences between a big state school like
Mm.
Michigan State and, of course, Brown University, which we know is an Ivy League. And so many questions came up. The question that people ask, well, should I take that AP course and maybe end up with a B plus, or take
Oh, right.
the regular course and end up with an A? And what do? And so to be honest with you, it was great to hear Logan from Brown talk about how, yeah, we prefer, that you take the AP course. We want you to show that you're trying the college rigor while in
Mhm.
high school, because what Logan and many of the other reps will say is there's really two main things that they're looking for, right? Or the first two things that they're looking for is number one, they want to make sure that you can handle the academic rigors once you're on their campus. Okay, so for a school like Brown University, taking the AP courses and demonstrating that you're able to do well is an important part of their process. Important in Larry's process as well in Michigan State. But if you listen to the episode, you see the clear nuances and differences in the two. So those are conversations, those are things that you're not necessarily going to find so easily by just looking at a college or university's website, right? Where you're going to find the deadlines, the mid 50%, maybe some schools like Johns Hopkins, for example, and also Hamilton College upstate in New York. They have something called Essays That Work, where they actually share for the last 5 years a bunch of essays from students that were actually admitted. So they show you examples of personal statements, right? But you're not going to find the differences and similarities between schools by just looking at the website so easily when on the podcast, you're actually hearing from top directors, top deans, and even college counselors speaking to me, through these podcast episodes.
And they're not all saying the same thing.
Right.
Definitely not. And there are a lot of similarities, by the way. They definitely are.
Of course. Like, should I get good grades? Should I,
Of course you should get good grades.
do some activities?
That doesn't matter.
And I was saying that there's the two things that they're looking for. They're looking for, could you handle the work? And what kind of a community member you're going to be, how you're going to contribute. So a question that comes up a lot, for just to give you another example, is a simple thing like, do they track when a student demonstrates their interest? And here's the thing, right? What I learned in the conversations about demonstrating your interest, it really doesn't matter whether or not the school actually tracks it. And I'll tell you why. Because whether they do or don't, it's very important for you to do the things that fall under the umbrella of demonstrating your interest. For example, visiting the school, opening the emails, engaging with the links, virtual events, what have you, right? If a rep comes to your high school, engage with him or her. If you see them at a college fair. And the reason is because, first of all, if they track it, fantastic, sign in.
And they do track it. Let's just be clear.
Right.
They track it,
because they can, right? We all know. I mean, that's the change in the admissions process as we were in school is there are so many ways they can track it, much like whatever you search to shop for on the internet turns up in your Facebook feed. So
correct.
They can track it.
But you're saying, John, that you should be an educated consumer. You're applying to this school. You have this vision of them, but you need to know the reality.
Right.
And ask very specific questions to make sure that if you're accepted and you choose to go, you're not suddenly shocked by where you find yourself.
And what I'll add to that is, yes, they track it, but what I meant to add to it is, do they use it in their application review process? In other words, do they consider it in the application review? Now, whether they do or don't does not matter. The point is, you should do those things so that you could learn about the school. And so, for example, if you have to write a supplemental essay where what they're looking for you to do is to demonstrate your understanding of the institution, now you're able to do it because you've done those things under the umbrella of demonstrating your interest. That's what I'm
exactly
saying.
Right.
Which is interesting, which is kind of what you're pointing out. Because I'm a student who's interested in a particular school. Listening to your podcast and listening to what that college admissions representative has expressed would be a really great way to sort of harness, well, what do I know about this institution that I want to sort of incorporate into that statement so that they know I am more intimately familiar with their school as opposed to just like visiting their website. You're talking so far, I think, about a lot of things that maybe students or families might not have considered in terms of what they can control. I want to sort of switch it a little bit and say, can you share with us, what do you see in these conversations? Do you think that in this college admissions process are kind of out of an applicant's control?
So with the test optional movement, the first thing that's out of our control is the number of applicants that apply to all the schools. And every single rep that I interview consistently says that their applications are definitely on the rise. So it's those institutional priorities. And priority number one, I remember talking to Rick Clark out of Georgia Tech. He mentioned priority number one is our class size in terms of the number of freshmen that we're looking to accept as our freshman class. So I remember talking to, I think it was Villanova. They basically have an institutional priority where they're trying to admit 2,000 students. They get close to just shy of 30,000 applications. So think
Yeah.
about that. Close to 30,000 applications for institutional priority of a freshman class of 2,000. So consistently, we talk about the fact that if you could take the first 30%, right, in that pool of students that were rejected, frankly, their profiles are probably not that different than compared to the students that were accepted. So those are the things that are out of our control, the institutional priorities. Maybe they're looking, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I was going to just ask, like, digging deeper into that, say they're looking for 2000, and we're talking about institutional priorities. Uh, has anyone you've spoken to gotten into the weeds on, like, and maybe our marching band needs a tuba
Yes,
player, and, like,
absolutely.
we need a student from every state, and all
Yep.
of those other dimensions
Yes.
that a student has no control over.
Absolutely. So, for
Yeah.
example, recently I looked on the Emory website and they actually had the map of the United States and they listed the percentage from each corner of students that were admitted in
Yeah.
their current freshman class.
Right.
And I have to tell you, the four corners of the country, if you will, right? They had it was pretty consistent, right? It was definitely pretty consistent. I think there was more from the Southeast than in others, but it was pretty consistent, showing clearly that, there's a geographic need there. Their institutional priority is to actually have a balanced group of students from throughout the United States. When I interviewed Jeff Salingo, who's a, best-selling New York Times best-selling author,
Well-known authority
Yep.
in the
well
space.
known, amazing. I met him in person, and he wrote Who Gets In and Why, and
Yeah.
I had the honor of having Jeff on my podcast, and we talked about institutional priorities. And what Jeff said is, everyone thinks that the college process is about the students. It's actually really about the institution. So he talked about the fact that maybe they're looking for more students and families that could pay the full bill. They're looking for more full payers. Maybe it's a particular major, to your point, or maybe the baseball team needs a third baseman, what have
Yeah.
you. And
Mhm.
what makes it confusing is that all of those are true, right? Those are possible institutional priorities. And the thing is that we don't necessarily know what they are institution to institution. And those priorities, by the way, as you know, Mike, they change from year to
They
year.
change every year, right?
Yeah,
Like I
Mhm.
gave that example of the marching band needs a certain instrument. They need a tuba this year, but
right,
maybe next year they're going to need a French horn.
right.
And if you got into tuba, you're like, oh yeah, tuba's big at this school. You're like, no, we're saturated.
Exactly.
Fencing, Mike. It's all about fencing. Be a
Fencing,
fencer.
exactly.
Fencing. So this is all, really interesting, and I think there's a lot that families can do. Have any of the reps you've spoken to shared things that they just say, applicants keep doing this thing and I wish they'd do something different?
Yeah, there's a lot of things. The first thing that comes to mind is students should stop. And I think, by the way, this is when I was talking to Christoph Gutentag out of Duke University. He's the dean of admissions there. And what came up in that conversation is stop trying to think about what the typical applicant, for example, at Duke University looks like. Stop trying to think what people like Christoph and his team are looking for, because here's the thing. If you sound like every other kid that's applying to Duke, which is obviously a very competitive school, you're not going to stand out, right?
Brilliant.
And the whole
Right.
point of the college application process is to show your authentic voice, but how are you going to stand out? Like, stop trying to create this, perfect student that's applying to Duke or name your university. How are you going to stand out?
Well, it's interesting you say that because there's this sort of like kind of push and pull, right? You have to be able to recognize what the institution is like and how you would fit there. But at the same time, like what you're saying, you also have to sort of be like different enough to be like, oh, you're going to add something to our community. So
That's,
Right.
it's a very
yeah.
sort of delicate balance there.
We
It
had that
is.
conversation with Linda Abraham,
Right.
fitting in and
Mhm.
standing out.
Right.
Right.
I
Right.
was recalling that conversation.
The
Mike.
tightrope
Right.
you're walking.
Right. Right.
Another mistake that they make, if I may, and it goes back to the conversation about demonstrated interest. So the supplemental, too many times people spend so much time on the personal statement, which they should, they really should, because you got to understand that that's where your personality is going to stand out, whatever it is that you write about. Then all of a sudden, the student sees that this particular school has two supplementals, and it's like, oh my God, you know what? And they rush through it. Or worse, they write one supplemental and they use it for each and every school. So the nuance, what's become very clear from the admissions reps with the supplemental essay, is that that's where you need to demonstrate your understanding of that institution. So, for example, NYU, in my conversations with NYU, New York University, they made it very clear that they are a global brand, and that is something that is near and dear to them. So, what I would say is listen to that message in the podcast episode, read their mission and philosophy. And when you're writing a supplemental, which, by the way, is why NYU, which is the typical question, why do you want to go to that school? Demonstrate that you understand who they are, their philosophy. Is it a school that's big on interdisciplinary studies and opportunities? Whatever it is, demonstrate that you understand it. Talk a little bit about what you did in high school that is in line with that. Talk about why you want to be specific on that campus. And by the way, end with talking about how you're going to contribute to that awesome community, to your point, Amy. So if you're able to do that, and I know it's easier said than done, but if you're able to do that, as opposed to answering, why Michigan, and use your why Michigan essay, supplemental essay for NYU and Duke and Wisconsin and UCLA and on, that is a huge mistake. And they will see right through that.
Makes perfect sense. That definitely ties into your point about learning, demonstrating authentic interest, and then
Right.
having the opportunity to show that you did. I would just want to step back and kind of, we've spoken a lot about what people can do, what they can't do. Let's talk about the process itself. When we were all going through our application process,
You mean
things
like
were
10 years ago?
much simpler.
It was
10 years ago for you, Amy? Was
Just
that
10, just 10, Mike.
So, I mean, it's not my imagination that things are incredibly more complex now. Why does today's process require so much experience, so much knowledge, so much insight? What do you think, John?
So I could go on and on about this one. I could talk a lot about what the colleges, I think, could be doing, which they're probably not going to do. Which, number one, they should be accepting more people. There's no reason why any school can only accept 5%. I think there are schools out there that are, maintaining their brand of being elite. And
Well,
that's
I
just
think you
my
just
honest
answered
opinion.
your own question. That's exactly why.
Well, yes. But what I will do is I'll focus, because I imagine that most of the people that are listening to this podcast are the parents, hopefully a lot of the students as well. And I think that it doesn't have to be that complicated, Mike, if we are mindful of the fact that any school where the acceptance rate is 15% or less, I don't care if you're the valedictorian, A plus average, the captain of the soccer team, any school whose acceptance rate is 15% or less, that is a reach school for everybody. There's one student who was still very much in touch. She graduated years ago. She was accepted to Stanford and Yale, but her dream school was Harvard. Okay. She was a legacy student and all of that. Guess what? She didn't get in. No rhyme
Right.
or reason. She didn't get in. And so I think it's important to create a balanced list. Certainly apply. If you want to apply to Ivies, you want to apply to competitive schools, absolutely. But be mindful of the reach schools, the target schools, the safety schools. And the advice that I give in my book is to try to balance that out. You don't want to apply to 8 reach schools, 1 target, 0 safety. I mean, I think we know people like that, and I think that's a mistake. You also don't want to apply to 0 reach schools, 1 target, and 7 safety schools, right? You don't want to underestimate yourself either. You want to find a balance, maybe 3 of each, maybe 2, 3, 2, whatever the numbers are. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we as families make the process far more stressful than it has to be. If you understand the nuances that, yes, if you're applying to schools that are 15% or less, and you could apply to 2, 3, 4 of them, it doesn't make it any easier to get in. It's a reach school for everybody. So balance list, do your research, definitely apply to a lot of the targets, definitely have some safeties on your list. And frankly, if a school doesn't want you, it's their loss. It's their loss. And be mindful of the fact that there's over 4,000 colleges and universities in the country, in the United States alone. every student has more than one school that is the right fit for them,
Yeah.
but not every school is the right fit for you. I forgot which rep I was talking about. And they said, if you apply to Dartmouth and UPenn, they're both Ivies, but they couldn't be more different.
Different.
Right.
Yes.
That's right.
In terms of location and what have you. So I think if we take all of these things into consideration, we can make it less stressful. And that's what I try to do in the podcast, right? I try to pull the curtain back, talk to people from the admissions office, and it's just been so much fun.
A lot of people are applying to schools and they're not really being realistic about the financials. So I think if more families could have sat down and had that realistic financial conversation, we might see the number of colleges they're applying to drop, in
Right.
which case
Right.
we might start. I'm not going to say we're ever going to have normal acceptance rates at these selective institutions, but I think there's just a lot of this throw your hat in a million different rings. But
Right.
at the end of the day, we all know, at least in my neck of the woods, a lot of families end up making the decision based upon the financial. More research on that end at the front end, I think, would make the reality check at the back end of those reaches versus whatever. I think it would kind of turn the numbers around a little bit more in students' favor, is what I would say.
Absolutely. And to your point, that's such a great point, Amy. And it falls under the things that we really do control if we choose to talk about it.
If we're willing to accept the reality of the finances.
Accept it and be willing to
Yeah.
talk about it. The last question to the reps is always, what are your top 3 pieces of advice that you would provide students and their families getting ready for the college admissions process? And 99% of the times they talk about the financial piece,
Yeah.
the importance of speaking about it frequently, early, using their net price calculators.
Absolutely.
Which if you're honest with the
100%.
net price calculator, you'll get a decent amount, a decent feeling in terms of what the cost is actually going to be. And frankly, look, I went to Stony Brook like you, Mike, right? We went to a state school. We did okay, right? And so
Right. That's such a
That's
good.
it.
I mean, look, obviously Stony Brook is a little harder to get into
yes,
these
I
days.
couldn't get in now. Yes.
But I didn't mean because of us. I mean, but because, it's a great school. The degree it counts for more every year. But I remember when I got in, it was my safety school. Like it was.
Wow.
And a stat that I love sharing with families is that more than 75% of schools accept more than 75% of students.
That's right.
And we have to accept, we all talk about the selective schools, and they remain selective by being selective. The minute they accept 75% of applicants,
Well,
they're
then
not
they drive the
selective schools
conversation.
anymore.
They drive the conversation.
They
Unfortunately.
do.
Yeah.
Right.
But for the families that are looking at all this and thinking, well, I'll put this school as my reach school, or I'll put this school as my safety school, very often the right student will make the most of everywhere they go. And if a student wants a great education, a student will get a great education. If a student doesn't want a great education, it doesn't matter where they go. They're not going to get it.
Right. I couldn't agree with you more. And, we look at rankings way too much. And I always say, if there's a school that's consistently in the top 10, but that school is in a rural area, it's an airplane ride away from you, and you want to be in an urban environment, and you want to be, I don't know, within 2 hours, let's say, of driving distance from home. I don't care that school's been on the top 10 for the last 25 years. That school's not for you.
Right.
So I think that's got to be the shift. And that's the fun part of the college process is, first of all, do you really want to go away? How far? An airplane ride. Do you want to be within 2 hours? I always tell the story, and I had so much fun with my oldest daughter, who now graduated, and she's a teacher of mathematics, whatever. But initially, she thought she wanted to go, frankly, to Penn State University. And I was so excited because I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I'm going to go to all the football games. Like, I didn't really have that experience at Stony Brook, but I was really looking forward to it. Mike and Amy, we went to that campus. It took us probably about 6.5 hours, which made her really think like, oh my God, do I want to be this far away? We walked into a lecture hall, and Mike, Stony Brook, especially when you are
300 seats, right?
So we walked into this lecture hall that probably had like 7 auditoriums in it.
Right.
Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but I'm walking in, I'm smiling, I'm so excited. It was great being there. She looks around, she sees kids on the floor on the outside, and she says, "Dad, what is this?" So I explained. I said, "These are kids. Maybe they didn't want to see. Maybe they arrived late. They want to lay down. That this is class." She was a fish out of water. Right. To this day, I love Penn State. I wish I would have went to a school like that. It was not the right fit for my daughter at the time.
Sure.
She's now 23. She graduated with her master's. She did a 4+1 at a much smaller school up in Connecticut. Nowadays, she probably would be more than fine in Penn State, but when she was 16 and we were visiting, it
That's
just
totally
wasn't the
fair.
right fit for her.
Yep.
So you have to get out there and you got to be truthful to yourself. Do you want to be far? How far? Do you want big, small, rural, urban, what have you? All of those things are really important because, something that doesn't come up a lot in my podcast, which, for the next 250 episodes, because I'm going to reach that 500 mark. One of the things that I want to talk more about is the anatomy of the transfer. We don't talk about how many people end up transferring. And
we just did a transfer episode because
we've
it's
done
not talked
one
about.
episode out of 600 on that topic.
But it's important to the conversation. Totally important. Yep. Mm-hmm.
I do, because I want to have the conversation as to why, and for example, in many cases, I would bet is because maybe people didn't take the time to really learn about the school. How far, the area, the academics, do they have your major? What is the social life like? All of those questions and more. And so, is that what forced you to transfer after a year? You were unhappy. Why? What would you have done differently in the college process as opposed to just looking at the fact that, well, the school was in the top 25, so I had to apply there and I got in, so I went. It's got to be more than that. You really have to do your research. And if you understand these points, I think it will be less stressful. I really do. Mm-hmm. And granted, apply to your reach schools, target, make sure you have some safety in there, do all of that. But don't just put a few eggs in the basket. You really have to expand your horizons and be true to who you are and what you're looking for in a college education so that, frankly, you can enjoy the 4 years and beyond.
Mm-hmm. Makes perfect sense. Listen, John, it's obvious we could talk for hours about this topic. Yeah. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Again, guys, thank you so much. It's an honor and pleasure. You guys are doing awesome work. Take care.
If listeners would like to get in touch with you, besides buying straight from the admissions office at Insider Strategies for College Applications, how can they get in touch with you?
So thank you, Mike. My website is www.collegeadmissionstalk.com, or you could always email me at john@collegeadmissionstalk.com. Thank you so much.
Awesome. We hope you enjoyed this discussion as much as we did. Be sure to join us for another fascinating topic and guests on the next Tests and the Rest.
Did you enjoy this episode as much as we did? Find expanded links and more for this and all of our episodes at our show page at testsandtherest.com. While you're there, be sure to explore everything the larger TestBright site has to offer, including real, expert, unbiased answers to the toughest admissions testing questions. Of course, we'd love for you to rate, review, and subscribe to Tests and the Rest on your favorite podcast platform. If there's a topic or guest you'd like us to feature, just let us know and spread the word.